we were doing missions work in kind of different regions of China, and this pastor came to us who we had contact with, and he actually had done missionary work inside of North Korea for almost 10 years. And he said that in the history of North Korea, he's only ever been allowed to bring people in for 7 days max. He said, but they were trusting him to bring in a team of up to 8 people for 30 days. And that had never happened in the history of North Korea. And so he sat us down and he said, so I prayed and I started to seek where are missionaries in the region? Who could I bring in? You know, he's looking for this team, this elite team. Like you'd want to send like the SWAT team of Christianity into North Korea, right? You want trained and highly equipped and evangelists. Like you would think you would want the best, right? To go into North Korea. But he's like, I looked and I looked and I looked. And he said, and your team of 8, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and 21-year-olds, right? You were the only ones I could find. And then he said, will you come with me into North Korea for 30 days? And he said, it's just, you're my only option. That's it. And so it was like, I was looking for these theologians and these evangelists and stuff. He's like, but, you're here. Like, I don't know if that's a compliment, like he's telling us you're the only option. That's why we're asking you, right? But he said, but if you don't, we might never have this opportunity again. So we prayed about it. And we felt like the Lord said, go. And so here we are, a team of 8 of us, 19, 20, 21, going into North Korea for the next 30 days. And man, I felt disqualified. I felt I am not this wild evangelist. I am not very well trained. Like I am not this Billy Graham kind of a guy, right? And I'm thinking, oh man, I am in way over my head. And I looked at my team, and if I had no faith in myself, I had even lower faith for my team. I looked around, and we couldn't even agree on simple things like sports. We'd get in arguments. We're like, we're supposed to preach the gospel in China, and we don't want to talk because we're mad about a sports game, right? Or the girls were gossiping about each other. There's only 8 of us, and somehow gossip was still going around, right? And the girls were crying because someone had a breakup back in the States and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh man, we are not the team to do this, all right? You're asking us to go in. And I remember saying, God, why us? We'll do it. We feel like you're calling us to do this, but why us? And have you felt that before? Have you ever had this thought? This isn't unique to my situation in North Korea. Have you ever had a moment where you said, God, do I have to be the one? Like, here I am, Lord. Can you send someone else, though? Like, do I have to be the one to go through the family drama and be the big person again? Do I have to be the one to go through this hard work environment? Do I have to be the one to go through this physical ailment? God, do I have to be the one again to go through this, right? Have we felt that before? And we can feel so disqualified with this, oh man, why are you choosing me? And we can be so quick to want to offload it, delegate it out to somebody else. Let the pastors do it. That's why we pay them. They do it. Yeah, let the missionaries do it. Let the youth do it. They got energy, and then the youth are like, let the older people do it because they know what they're doing, right? And everyone wants to offload it onto somebody else all the time. And yet God wants to choose you to be the one to do it. And this is what's crazy, is that we weren't chosen to go into North Korea because we were the best, but because we were the only ones available. You see, God doesn't choose us based upon how qualified we are. Him choosing us is what makes us qualified. And who does he choose? It says, many are called, few are chosen. But who does he choose? Well, in Isaiah, he says he's scanning, saying, who will go? And Isaiah says, here I am. Send me. And we were the only ones who said, we'll do it. We'll go into North Korea. We don't know what we're doing, but we'll do it. Right? And God said, they're perfect because they're willing. It doesn't matter the resume of your past, your mistakes, all the different things of your past or why you're unqualified. What matters is the position of your heart. Say, okay, God, I'm in way over my head, but I know where I'm weak, you're strong. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it afraid because I have faith in you that you can do it, right? And so we go into North Korea, and the night before the briefing, when we're going to go in, the pastor says to us, okay, so there's a good chance you will be the only Bible these people ever read because the Word of God's illegal, right? And I'm thinking, they're going to get a really abridged version of the Bible. Oh man, they're about, forget the New International Version, they're going to get the Teenage Taylor Paraphrase version, they're going to get this wacky version, right? And that's also true today, by the way. My wife gave her Bible away to someone yesterday because they had never read the Word of God. There's people all around you, that was in Escondido, there's people all around you have never heard the Word of God, and you might be the Bible they're reading. Are they reading a good version? That's another topic. That's a bunny trail. I'll let that sit with you for another time. So we go in, we get on the bus, we're going into North Korea, and the North Korean guard, we get assigned 2 North Korean guards who are going to be with us this entire time. And the North Korean guard, he starts to give us like the history of North Korea, and he's talking about the beauty of it and all this stuff. He's trying to like get us excited for like going in and try to show us how amazing it is and all this stuff, right? But then he gets to this awkward part where he talks about the war. And from his perspective, I'm not saying this is my perspective, but from his perspective, it was all of America's fault. And so he says this line where he said, and then America came in and destroyed my nation, right? And I don't know about you, but that's not the greatest first impression, to say, hey, welcome to my house. You've destroyed my people, right? And so we all got really awkward and really quiet. And then he said, and I think he realized it because then he looked at us and he said, and he looked at the women because we had the 5 girls. They're tearing up. We're like, what? I'm sorry. Like they hate us, right? And he says, no, it wasn't the women's fault. He says, the women were home taking care of the families. Like, it's not your fault. No, it was the American men who destroyed our nation. And then he looks over and the 3 guys were like, oh man. And then 2 of the guys were Korean American, right? And I was the only white guy, right? And he looks and he says, oh, it's not the Korean Americans' fault. He said, because you didn't have a choice, like you were taken into America, like all this stuff, right? It's not, you're our brothers. We want to be connected to you. And then he looks at me and he says, it was the white American man's fault. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, me? Like, oh, I've been accused of some things before, but I've never been accused of toppling nations, right? And there was this immediate hatred that I could feel towards me. We hate everything you symbolize as the white American man. Talk about feeling like, in that moment, I felt so discouraged. Oh God, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? How do I show them Jesus when he can't even look past my skin, right? Or things that happened so long ago. And this is a lead up. We're looking at Colossians today. This is a similar place where they were in. Colossae, the pastor kind of that church there was a younger man named Epaphras, and he had been converted by Paul. But Colossians was one of the only epistles written to a church that Paul never got a chance to actually go to. All the other places he kind of went, he planted the churches, and then he wrote them letters. What happened is he's in jail now, and one of his spiritual sons is planting this church, and his spiritual son's freaking out, like, I don't know what I'm doing. This young guy, Gentile guy, and he's in this crazy city. Colossae literally means monstrosity when you look at the literal language. And monstrosity means something so big, so offensively wrong. Right? Imagine a city, you think some of our cities are bad. Imagine it was so bad you named this city, that place is a monstrosity. Let's just call it monstrosity, right? And he has this little house church of people. And it's this weird mix mash. There's a cultic, gross things going on in the land, but there's also all these Jewish people that fled Israel that are in there, and they don't like what he's preaching either. So you got this weird mix mash, culturally divided, racist place that's offensive, right? And he's here as a young man trying to keep a church together in way over his head and feeling disqualified. So he reaches out to his spiritual dad and says, what do I do? Right? And when I read about that guy, I was, oh, I have been there. I've so been in that same spot. And so when we look at, okay, what is the advice? So Paul is going to give advice. This is what you do. When you feel disqualified, when you feel way in over your head, when you feel not enough, when you feel like you can't do it, he's writing them a letter to help give them advice. If I got that letter in North Korea from like my pastor saying, here's all you got to do, right? That would have been awesome, right? That would have been amazing. And Paul, of all people, legendary Paul, right? That the guy's like a myth. Like, he's incredible, right? Loves Jesus, all this thing, miracles, right? You get a letter from Paul telling you what to do. I would open that up and say, what do I have to do, Paul? And this is where our first strategy comes in as to what to do when you feel horribly disqualified. This is it. Go to Colossians 1. He opens Colossians 1 and he starts to say, just greetings. I'm praying for you. I love you. And then he gets here to Colossians 1, verse 15. He says, he, talking about Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on heaven or on earth. Oh man, making peace by the blood of his cross. I don't know about you, but this doesn't seem like quick, practical advice on how to change my life and how to deal with a hard situation. But this is the first thing he does. Rather than jumping to try to give all this advice on what to do, what does he do first? He starts to just brag on Jesus. Point one is this. You can throw that up. When you feel horribly disqualified, this is what you do. Focus on who he is. Stop focusing on everything going around you and take a moment. But yes, we'll get to the practical advice later. But first, you need to remember who Jesus is right now. This I'm telling you, if we had this one simple thing, it would change our lives. If every moment when we feel horribly disqualified, we would stop and say, Jesus, for through you, by you, for you, everything was made. Jesus, you're in control. Jesus, you have glory. Jesus, right? And we focus on him. It gets us from focusing on the storm all around us, and it lifts our head to say, oh yeah, he's in charge. Oh yeah, Jesus. It's all about him. I'm going to be fine. Because at the end of the day, look at him. So this is what we started doing in North Korea is we started just getting real practical with this, is we just started worshiping Jesus all the time. In the morning, we did a worship set in our little room. In the afternoon, we did a worship set. And we would just declare, we'd read Bible verses that declared who Jesus was. Because we might be the first ones ever in North Korea to read the Bible like this, right? So we're proclaiming out, right, prayers saying, Jesus is in charge of North Korea. Jesus is going to be glorified in this land. Jesus is, and we started to proclaim him out over our situations, just who he was. And I'm telling you, this is a strategy for your life. If you feel in the dumps for your marriage or your finances or your work or you have no faith for America and California, stop for a moment and say, Jesus is the healer of all marriages. He put us together. He brought us together. He has faith for this marriage. If you need a faith for America, or faith for California, or faith for your job, say, Jesus wants to be glorified in this land. Jesus is still in charge. Jesus, and what it does, it just pulls you out of the funkiness and it kind of recalibrates you, resets you back. Oh yeah, I remember who's in charge. So we started doing this, and I'm telling you, it worked better than any sermon. It worked better than any points. We could have argued all day long with North Koreans about history and what was right and what was wrong and all this stuff, but we just worshiped. And people, they started saying to us in the hotel area we were staying, they said, something feels so different. They said, we get, oh man, they said, something's different about your group. What is it? They said, you're so lighthearted. In the darkest nation on earth, one of them, how come you guys are just so lighthearted? How come you have so much joy? How come you, one person said, it's like the air in here is different. And they had no words to describe. They were feeling something different happening. And we were able to say, it's because we worship Jesus. It's because we love Jesus. We're lighthearted. Christians should be the most lighthearted people on the planet because we're the only ones who can give our burdens away to someone. We're the only ones who we know there's someone in charge. So we should, come on, fruit of the Spirit, love, what's next? Joy. Right? Seriousness is not a fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace. So let's carry love, let's carry joy, let's carry peace. And they notice this is different. But that could only happen because we started focusing on him. We go, oh, it's so dark. Oh, they hate us here. They hate white people. They hate me. They hate America. Why am I doing here? I miss home. Right? We could just be in a pity party all day long, right? But Jesus, he didn't come to my pity party. I invited him. He doesn't always show up, you know? And instead, when we focused on him, it changed everything. And so we started singing Amazing Grace. We'd walk through the streets singing, you know, Amazing Grace. And we'd start singing. And they loved it. The Korean guards, they said, what is this song? And they learned it with us. And they would sing Amazing Grace with us as we walked through the towns. And then one day he finally said, what does that song mean? And we go, oh, actually, it's all about Jesus and his grace. And I was blind. But I can see now because he saved me. I was lost, but he found. And we shared the gospel with the guards. And he said, I'm not allowed to sing that song anymore. He said, I could get in a lot of trouble if I'm found singing a song about Jesus. He said, you can sing it. It's okay. You guys can sing it, but I can't. I'll just listen. From then on, he wouldn't sing Amazing Grace with us anymore. But he always said, can you guys sing that song? And he'd sit back, and you could tell it was ministering to his heart. He'd sit there and listen and say, I just love that song for some reason, right? Because there's power when we just focus on him and his grace. And so we didn't have these great divine Roman roadmap to how to convert North Koreans, but what we figured out was just bring worship and things change. And then let's actually jump. We're going to go back to Colossae. So the second strategy, first focus on him. Second strategy is this, before you get into all the practical advice, do this, is focus on who you are in him, or rather who he is inside of you. I want to show you this. In the Jewish custom of the day, there was a lot of talk about this, for generations, the secret, mysterious plan that God had, that one day he would reveal to us. And Israel talked a lot about this. There's a mysterious plan that God's going to reveal one day. And then in the Greek culture, there was all this stuff about secret knowledge. There was like this obsession with a secret knowledge. That's where we get these things called the Gnostic Gospels. It was like this secrecy knowledge thing. There was all this cult practices claiming I found the secret knowledge. And so what happens is after he goes from focusing on who Christ is, he shifts. And he says this in Colossians 1:26. He said, the mystery hidden for ages and generations, but now revealed to his saints. So he's appealing, I know what the mystery is. And the Jews would have sat up and said, God told you? You know? He revealed it to you? The mystery of the ages? You know it? And then the Greeks would have tuned in and said, whoa, wait, like you know that you have secret knowledge? What is it? Tell me about the secret knowledge, right? And so he's appealing to the great mystery that has always been hidden. And in verse 27, he says, to them God chose to make known how great among the Gentiles are the riches of the glory of this mystery. So he's building it up. He's like, oh, it's so glorious. Oh, even the Gentiles get to learn about it. It's rich. It's so huge, right? So he's like building this up. What is this mystery? And he says, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Come on, this punches victim mentality right in the gut. Oh God, why won't you? Oh man, we're just waiting. We're just buckling up until Jesus comes back. We're just hanging in there by the last thread, hopefully, and then when I die, I'll get to be in heaven, or hopefully I'll make it and Jesus will come back. He says, no. You're not waiting for this glory one day. Right now, this is the mystery. Christ, the one that we just talked about, the one we focused on, the one who's supreme and in charge of all that. Now he is in you. And that's the hope of glory. You don't need to hope he comes one day, maybe. He's already come in you now. And you are the hope of him coming to your family. You are the hope of him coming. Christ, not you, we can't do it, but him in you, right? Shining through you. That's the hope for your job. If you're praying, God, please show up in my job, there's a good chance he's like, I'm in you. I'm waiting. Say something. If you don't know what to do, just sing Amazing Grace. That might work, it's okay. Like, you don't need the perfect strategy. Just be uniquely you with him in you, and that changes things. He didn't say, Christ in me, Paul, I'm the hope. I'll come help you out. Here I come, right? He said, no, Epaphras, Colossae, Christ in you is the hope. You guys don't need Christ in Taylor, the hope of glory. You need Christ in you, the hope of glory. Christ inside of you. And so when we began to focus, after focusing on him, it stripped away all the heaviness, and we could be joyful, we could laugh, we could be lighthearted. But the next thing was this, is when we stopped trying to be something we weren't, stopped trying to be the perfect evangelist, the perfect teacher, the perfect Christian SWAT team people, and we allowed ourselves to be 19-year-olds who just loved Jesus, loved people. And we said, from that place, I don't know how to do this, but I know how to love. Maybe God can use that. And so, can I tell you our divine from heaven strategies that we did? Yeah, you guys want to hear those? Thank you. I'll tell you right here. So, we set up a volleyball net. And we were thinking, let's invite them to play volleyball. They all want to beat the Americans in volleyball. We don't know how to play volleyball, but let's set it. Because we found a volleyball net. Somehow North Korea had a volleyball net, so we set it up. And we said, come play the Americans in volleyball. Like 50, 60 people show up. And we just sit there. We just get destroyed after team, because we don't know how to play. And they're actually really good, right? and then we said, okay, this isn't fair. Because we could see they hated us at first. They'd say something in Korean, and we would say to the translator, what are they saying? And he said, they're saying you are monsters. Right? Oh, they're like, you're so tall, and you're very pale. Right? Oh, that's fine. But then what we did is we said, hey, let's change up the teams. Let's mix it up now. And now we had American mixed with North Korean teams, two political enemies on the same teams together, playing each other. And I'd be setting it to the North Korean guard, and he'd be spiking it. Right? And then I'd high five him, right? And then I even did something crazy. Yeah! And I gave him a hug, right? And then him and I are jumping up and down. We won, right? And this is the guy who said, the white American man destroyed my nation. And in the moment of hopping around in victory, of winning in volleyball, he looks at me and he said, Taylor, it kind of slipped out. He said, you're not like other Americans. Hey, I'll take that as a compliment right now, right? Because he thinks Americans destroyed them. So, okay, sure, I'll take that. That's a big compliment right now, right? And then we just started, we didn't know how to do apologetics and all this stuff, which is good if you know how to do it. We didn't know how to do that, but we knew how to build a family. And so when we would sit down and when we would eat dinner, they wouldn't sit with us. And every single meal, we'd say, come sit with us. We'd steal their chairs and put them at our table with us. And they'd, no, we can't sit with you. We're not allowed to sit with you. Finally, we wore them down. We would keep talking to them. We would just shout at them from across the room and include them in the conversation where they wanted to not. And then eventually they finally came and they started sitting with us. Then they started sitting amongst us. And then family style, we're passing food around. And then we'd swap stories. And we weren't allowed to preach the gospel to them, but we found out we were allowed to talk about the gospel with each other and let them overhear. So I'd be like to my leader, hey, tell me how you got set free from drugs again. And they'd be like, oh, it was Jesus. And we would talk and they'd hear the gospel in the room. And then, or we'd leave it on cliffhangers. We'd be like, yeah, I was depressed and suicidal and I hated my life, which was a true testimony. I said, and then everything changed. And I'd just go back to eating. And the guard would be like, excuse me, like, what happened? We'd say, oh, you're asking me? You want to know? Yeah, what happened? What saved you from wanting to die? Jesus. And then how? What? Yeah, can I tell you about it? Yeah. And then we'd share the whole gospel. He heard the gospel like 100 times, right? Because we didn't know how to preach the gospel, but I knew how to sit at a table and share my story, right? And then I asked him, can you teach me Korean? Like and he lit up because he thought Americans just only cared about themselves and wanted the world to learn English. And he said, you want to learn my language? I said, yeah. And so he pulled out a napkin and he taught me how to read Korean on a napkin. He taught me the alphabet. And then we're driving one day and I see this sign and I'm like, mul, water. Is there a beach nearby? And I said that and he lit up. And he said, Taylor, I think you might be Korean inside. Yes. I went from man who destroyed his nation to not American, I guess, and maybe now I'm Korean inside. I'm like a Oreo, like inside I'm different, different. And he's like, yeah, I think you might be Korean. We didn't know how to. He tried to bring up politics, and I was like, bro, that's way over my head. I don't know. I'm not here to argue with you. And honestly, if I did, it wouldn't have done anything. He's trained to know, like, Americans, we disagree on politics and history and what happened. I didn't know what to do. But I knew how to listen. I said, well, why don't you tell me your side of the story? What happened? And tears in his eyes. I don't care if the facts are right, but he was crying because he talked about how he had loved ones die in that war. He had people die, and that's real. He talked about a village that got leveled by bombs. And he teared up, and he just said, we lost so many people, And he's taught, it's our fault, right? We know a different side of the story, of course, but I didn't defend. But then I said, will you forgive us? And he looked and what? I said, can you forgive us for hurting you? And he didn't know what to do. He said, Taylor, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I said, no, I know, but my people, I love America. America is my home. It's my nation. It is my people. And on behalf of my people, I'm sorry for hurting you. And he started tearing up and he didn't know what to do. He totally broke character from this stiff guard to he started to break down. He was letting his human heart be seen. And then after a while, we just sat in silence. I put my hand on him and he just said, I forgive you. I forgive you. And then after that, everything changed. Every day he'd say, can you tell me a story about Jesus? And then he started asking, what's America like? And then he said, maybe one day, maybe I could come see America one day. And his whole heart began to unravel. And we shared the gospel with him over and over and over again. And he just started becoming fascinated with Jesus. Not because we argued or anything like that or had logical points, but because we just listened and asked for forgiveness. My point is this with all of you is that was Christ and Taylor. That was uniquely me. I didn't have the training, but I had love. And I could just open up to him. And so for you, you might think that you're not the right person to get that person saved, or you're not the right person. You're disqualified. Let me go get the pastor, and then he'll come and talk to you. Let me go get the trained person. I need to go to seminary and college, which is good. Like, I believe in that stuff. But you don't have to wait till that's over to then finally be qualified to lead someone to Jesus. It's Christ in you already. You already have everything you need inside of you to bring the hardest heart back to Jesus. There's going to be people who tune me out and don't like me, but they'll open up to you. They'll listen to you, and you can bring Christ to them. It's Christ in you, the hope of glory. I'm going to end the story here, but before leaving, after the month was over, I didn't want to leave. It felt like home. And I was God, I don't want to go. This very nation I didn't want to come to, was terrified of. I don't want to leave now. Because we had built a family. And then on our way out, as we were driving, the bus was going. He said a few things. He said, "You've shown me that Americans are really good people." And he slipped in, "I don't agree with your government all the time." Like, well, neither do we, you know. But he said, "But your people are really good." And I said, "Yeah, North Korean people are very good people." And then he said, he said, "I only have one last thing I want to ask of you." He said, "Can we all sing Amazing Grace together one last time?" And then him and the two guards and the bus driver, as we were driving back, fully knowing it was about Jesus, sang with us. And he was singing with his eyes closed, "Amazing Grace," and he was singing with us, knowing that if he got caught doing that, he'd be in jail. And then as we went to the border, he was like holding my hand. Just wanted to hold my hand. And he looked at me and he said, "Taylor, one day you bring your children to meet my children here." So that was a prerequisite with Laurel. I said, "Hey, we might have to take our kids to North Korea one day." I made a promise to someone. She said, "I'm in." So I said, "Perfect. Marry me." And I said, "Can I call you Hyung?" Hyung means older brother. And he smiled and he said, "Yeah, I'll be your Hyung." The man who said, "It's your fault my nation was destroyed," said, "You are now my Korean little brother." And I would love to see America. I want to see your children one day. Please, they begged us, come back one day. When we left, we saw them sitting there. We drove away, and almost a mile away, it was this long, straight bridge back over to China. We could still see them standing there watching us go. And the new bus driver on the other side, who was in a ministry, he said, "I don't know what you guys did." He said, "I've done this. I pick up teams all the time." He said, "I've never seen guards wait and watch. I've never seen guards hug. I've never seen guards shake hands." And he said, "I don't know what you did in there, but it changed their lives forever." And this was the ragtag, emotional teenager team that was not trained. And our strategy was this: focus on worshiping him and focus on just him loving people through you. It'll all work itself out. Right? So for you, my advice to you, and I realized that this advice carried me through the rest of my life. It's the same strategy. And no matter where I've been, even in America, in hard moments, oh yeah, just need to focus on him again. Christ. He is the visible image of the invisible God. And I have to memorize that Colossians passage. This is who you are. By you, all things are made. For you, through you, because of you. It's all you. And then end it with, and now you are in me. And that's the hope of glory on this planet, is you flowing through me to love people. So that's my challenge for you as you go out and as you feel horribly disqualified. Sometimes remember, you are qualified because you're willing and you said yes. And remember, focus on him. And remember, Christ in you is the hope of glory. Can we just stand and pray together?